In 2008, Alan Stanford was on top of the world. He was a Texas-born billionaire, a knighted citizen of Antigua, and a sports mogul. He lived like royalty. Private jets, mega yachts, luxury mansions, political connections, a private island in the Caribbean. To the world, Alan Stanford looked like a billionaire financial genius.
Is it fun being a billionaire?
Well, yes. Yes, I have to say it is fun being a billionaire, but it's hard work.
But less than a year later, that entire empire would vanish into thin air. This is the story of the second largest Ponzi scheme in American history. A $7 billion web of lies, luxury, and institutional failure. Alan Stanford was running a masterclass in deception from a tiny Caribbean island. This is how he built a mirage, how he stole billions from 30,000 innocent victims, and how it all came crashing down. As a young man, Stanford was ambitious and determined to become wealthy. In the 1970s, he entered the fitness industry, purchasing health clubs across Texas. His business flourished. Luxury gyms attracted customers willing to pay premium membership fees, and Stanford quickly built a regional fitness empire. Success, however, led to overconfidence. By the early 1980s, aggressive expansion and economic downturns pushed his company into financial distress. The fitness king had accumulated debts of $13.6 million. The business collapsed. For a time, Stanford largely disappeared from public view. A few years later, during a visit to the Caribbean, he learned about offshore banking and the advantages offered by loosely regulated financial jurisdictions. In 1986, Stanford established a bank on the island of Montserrat. The environment was ideal for someone seeking minimal oversight, an island where money laundering, tax evasion, and financial crime were almost encouraged. There were 300 banks for a population of 12,000 people. He assembled a team that included family members and associates with no banking experience. There was his father, James Stanford, a former insurance agent, a lawyer, a judge, and even a car salesman. A board of directors that was made up of nobodies, people that were either related by blood or by friendship to Stanford. To add credibility, he recruited an old college friend, James Davis, to oversee financial records. Investors were told their money was being placed into secure, carefully managed investments. In reality, only a small portion was invested as promised. Much of the money was diverted elsewhere, while fake financial statements created the illusion of stability and success. The scheme followed a classic Ponzi structure. Returns paid to existing clients came largely from funds deposited by new investors. As long as fresh money continued to enter the system, the illusion could survive. To support the deception, Stanford and his associates produced false investment records and fabricated account information. The assets were real. In reality, they never owned any of it. Alan Stanford quickly became rich. In 1987, his bank's books stood nearly $15 million. When regulatory concerns forced Stanford to leave Montserrat, he relocated his operations to Antigua. There, he found an even more favorable environment. In 1981, Antigua and Barbuda became an independent nation. Much of the country's political power was concentrated in the hands of the Byrd family, a powerful dynasty that was often surrounded by allegations of corruption and ties to arms and drug trafficking. Soon, Stanford International Bank became one of the most recognizable organizations on the island. Lavish headquarters, aggressive marketing, and promises of security attracted investors from around the world. A crucial part of Stanford's success was storytelling. He crafted an impressive personal narrative and presented himself as the leader of a sophisticated global financial institution. Through brochures, interviews, advertisements, and corporate videos, he projected credibility and prestige. Stanford loaned tens of millions of dollars to the local government. At that point, he was the island's largest employer. He became the first American to receive a knighthood from Antigua, transforming himself into Sir Alan Stanford. He felt completely untouchable.
The moral to this story is if you're full of BS, it'll get you to the top, but it will never, never, never keep you there. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Marketing became one of Stanford's greatest weapons. He invested heavily in advertising campaigns, television appearances, promotional videos, and public relations efforts. As money poured in, Stanford embraced an extravagant lifestyle. He acquired luxury homes, private aircraft, yachts, and numerous properties. By the early 2000s, Stanford's empire continued expanding internationally. Offices opened in major financial centers, and assets under management appeared to grow rapidly. Publicly, he was celebrated as a successful entrepreneur. Privately, the foundation of the business remained deeply unstable. In 2008, Stanford needed an aggressive marketing push to attract even more cash to keep the Ponzi scheme from collapsing. He chose cricket. He poured tens of millions of dollars into Caribbean cricket, culminating in the Stanford 2020 Super Series. It was a vulgar display of wealth that shocked the conservative cricket establishment. He flew into stadiums on private helicopters. He flirted with the wives of players on live television. He behaved like a king who owned the sport. And for a moment, the distraction worked perfectly. The glitz of the cricket tournament blinded the public to the dark clouds forming over his banks. But late 2008 brought the global financial crisis. Panic swept through the markets. Suddenly, thousands of Stanford's clients demanded their money back. But the money wasn't there. It was tied up in yachts, mansions, and failed airlines. The incoming cash from new investors dried up entirely. The classic Ponzi trap was snapping shut. At the same time, the SEC and the FBI were closing in. Regulators had actually suspected Stanford for years. By early 2009, they could no longer look away. Investigators finally moved aggressively against Stanford. The arrest of James Davis, his CFO, helped uncover critical evidence. Davis admitted that the operation had been fraudulent for years. Alan Stanford was arrested on the 17th of February, 2009 in Virginia, hiding in a girlfriend's house. Even then, he maintained his innocence and insisted the assets existed.
I will die and go to hell if it's a Ponzi scheme. It's no Ponzi scheme.
The FBI raided Stanford's headquarters in Houston, Texas. The assets were frozen. The empire evaporated in a single day. For the victims, the reality was devastating. Unlike victims of domestic bank failures, Stanford's clients discovered that because their money had been sent offshore to Antigua, it was not covered by standard U.S. investor protection insurance. Meanwhile, in prison, Alan Stanford was savagely beaten up by a fellow detainee. He hasn't gotten the country club treatment that so many white-collar criminals get. He's had the real penitentiary experience. In 2012, Alan Stanford stood trial in Houston. His CFO, James Davis, testified against him, revealing that the Stanford International Bank was a Ponzi scheme from day one, and that they had been lying to investors with false accounting, false results, false reports. They had been mishandling the investments for approximately 25 years. Alan Stanford was convicted on 13 felony counts and sentenced to 110 years in federal prison. Today, Alan Stanford sits in a high-security prison in Florida. He will never walk free. But for his 30,000 victims, true justice remains elusive. Over 15 years later, recovery efforts have yielded only a tiny fraction of their stolen money. Stanford's legacy is a grim reminder that when a financial opportunity looks too good to be true, it usually is. He built a kingdom on a foundation of stolen dreams, proving that even the most glittering empire can turn out to be nothing more than a mirage.
The moral to this story is if you're full of BS, it'll get you to the top, but it will never, never, never keep you there. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay curious. I'll see you next time. Peace.